This is the Spiritual Genius Show, the #1 podcast for unlocking more of your spiritual genius so you can really have it all. Get ready to discover timeless strategies and secrets you can use. You'll also hear from world-class entrepreneurs, leaders, athletes, and celebrities sharing how they've tapped into their spiritual genius, along with how you can do the same. Without further ado, here's your host, Yaakov Smart.
Welcome. Today we're joined by Sabrina Guler. If you don't know Sabrina, she is a serial entrepreneur and spiritual mentor who co-founded over $80 million in businesses by the age of 31. She is recently the founder of the Intuitive CEO, where she helps high achievers become their higher selves and create success from an aligned place. Welcome to the show, Sabrina.
Thank you for having me.
We have so much to talk about. Where to even start? So one thing that I really love and appreciate about Intuitive CEO is your slogan, where intuition meets ambition, right? So when you say that, what does that mean to you?
Okay, we're jumping right in. I love it. Where intuition meets ambition. So I'm actually going to take us back. So for those listening to this, Yaakov and I have been involved in similar lines of business prior to this new venture of ours. And I used to always put ambition before intuition. And so when you and I had first met, I had always put the business hat, on me before I really started to realize that the spiritual side of me, the intuitive side of me, was always making the right decisions and was always guiding me to a place where I felt the most fulfilled, the most aligned, and where I was making the most money. And so when I had gone on my own journey, it was a very spiritual journey that had led me here, where now when I look at any successful venture that feels good, right? Where you're not forcing, you're not chasing, you're not abandoning the core of who you are, I always realize that it came from an intuitive place. And so the Intuitive CEO, where intuition fuels ambition, is I really help others lean into that side of themselves to create that aligned success.
Right. So you're talking about people actually listening to themselves instead of overriding themselves with a hustle, get shit done type of act.
Yeah. I think there's a place for both. I think you can't have a business without discipline and without structure. But I also think that you can't really be your highest potential when you're just overriding those pieces of yourself and you're not truly allowing your full self to come through.
Yeah, well, to me, it's like masculine and feminine is a big part of that, right? Because it's like and I see a lot of people building businesses or trying to build businesses this way. And I think this is the way I see it anyway, there's a cap, right? If you're only operating from the masculine, if it's just do mode, you're going to burn yourself out. Versus if you're only operating from the feminine, where you're just like flowy all the time, that's also the extreme. So would you say that intuition, I guess being an intuitive CEO, is learning how to harmonize a lot of those energies?
Yeah. And there's a lot of different pillars to, I think, mastering this, right? And I think one of them is the yin, the yang, the masculine, the feminine, right? Learning how to trust your creativity, your inspiration, the overwhelming feeling that you have sometimes making decisions that don't make any sense, but it feels like you need to go and make that decision. I mean, whether you're listening to this right now, I feel like we've all made decisions where we didn't listen to that. And then like however many days, weeks, hours later, we're like, damn it, I should have led with that, right? I knew to trust myself. That's why we get upset with ourselves later on. And that boils down to like relationships, right? Staying with the partner that doesn't serve you and being with them for too long. And then you're 6 months too long. And then things end and you're like, I should have listened to myself. I knew it. Or making a financial decision, right? So I think those pieces are the feminine within us. They are not gender specific. It's just being able to flow, being able to create, being able to listen to your body, right? We have a lot of ancient wisdom in our bodies. And then you also have the masculine, which is to be direct, to be very focused, to have structure, to have container in your routines. And I think if you combine those two things, you will never feel suppressed, right? You will never feel like you're overriding your body or like you're not doing enough.
Yeah, I think that's great to be able to like harmonize both of them. And I think decision making is such an interesting topic in business, and not just in business, in life, right? I mean, our decisions, our choices make our reality to an extent, right? And so I'd be curious if someone came to you and said, okay, Sabrina, I want to be more of an intuitive CEO. What process do you recommend for making the right decisions? Because it comes down to self-trust, right? I think a lot of people, especially in business, if you're listening to this and you're just getting started in business, or you're pivoting to a new venture, this is really where our self-trust is tested, right? So what advice would you give someone on making the best decisions and following their intuition?
You know, it's so interesting because I was just reflecting about this particular topic. Someone asked me the other day, what is the difference between the mindset of someone being corporate versus the mindset of someone being an entrepreneur? And you know, obviously the day-to-day looks very different. And there's a lot of differences here, but I'm just talking about like the journey, because we were talking about my journey. For those listening, I used to work in corporate. I worked for Apple, then I started a business, and now I'm an entrepreneur. But I was telling them how when you work in corporate and you have been in corporate for many years, you are trusting someone else to pay you consistently. And 90% of the decisions that you make are kind of in someone else's container, right? There's a company agenda, some kind of an intention that you don't own, right? It's not your business. It's something, someone else that's kind of leading you. And then when you go to start a business, all of that falls on you. So when I went back into, when I left my job and I started my first business, I had so much anxiety and I had so much uncertainty because the decisions that I made outside of my corporate job were so minimal compared to the vast amount of decision-making that I had to take on as an entrepreneur. And I found that I had to trust myself. And when we look at really, really big entrepreneurs, successful ones that are doing some really crazy things, so you look at Elon Musk, right? Or you look at, Jeff Bezos, right? These people, the inception of their businesses actually didn't start the way that they are today. And if we had probably interviewed those people years ago, like let's take Elon, who wanted to make electric cars, so people probably thought he was insane. And he probably had to make like a series of decisions where he needed to trust himself, right? Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of balancing between trusting himself, people not believing in him probably taking external advice that was terrible, right? You should do this. You should try that. You should manage this. You should do it that way. That's how I do it, right? And then there's also a part of you that needs to buckle down and like really believe in what it is that you're creating and what it is you're working on. So when I look at being an intuitive CEO, I like to look at balancing what feels right? What comes in on the intuitive side. And I like to use data and logic as the pieces of data that connect your intuition. So we only make decisions based on what we know, right? We either know the physical or we know in the body. And I think when we combine those two things, that's when we're able to make incredibly informed, intuitive decisions. So it's taking data in, it's assessing what we know, it's updating our operating system of knowledge, and then it's using intuition to guide us to that right place. And I think that's why when we make decisions that are wrong, right? When we make like a decision that maybe we feel regretful for in the future, it's because maybe we took too much logic in and we overrided how we really felt about it.
Yeah, it's having that combination, again, that harmony between the two. I think a lot of your stuff is very yin and yang, which I really appreciate. There's a level of nuance to it. I think there's one side where we hear like the mainstream business advice, spiritual advice on one, oh yeah, just follow your intuition. Oh yeah, just follow the data, right? It's not so cut and dry, right? It's being able to marry the two. So can you think of a time where you maybe made a decision based on quote unquote data, where you overrode your intuition and the decision didn't turn out as well as you thought it would?
Plenty. I'd say I spent probably like a decade in my career where I slowly transitioned until being able to really trust myself and lean on myself. And I think if you are an entrepreneur, you have that innate muscle in you to go take risks and try new things. If I were to go back to a time, I was a part of, I've started a couple of businesses and I stayed in a business for too long. What made sense on paper, what made sense for everyone else didn't make sense for me. And I think I've also done that in relationships too in the past, I think, where I've stayed in something for too long. And so, you think back on it and you can even milestone the moments that you remember, right? About like when you were about to turn the leaf, but how you chose to stay there because you needed more data, right? You needed to collect more data to make that more informed decision, right? To prove whether or not you're going in the right way.
And I think that's something that's perfectly okay too. I think sometimes people beat themselves up. Oh yeah, I should have left that earlier. I should have known. And it's like, and maybe you did, but sometimes you got to go on the roller coaster at extra time just to make sure that you don't really want to keep going on it or to really learn that lesson. I think there's nothing wrong with that here.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it's all about understanding what feels true to you. One of the things that I think is fascinating is, if we're not in tune with where we are making decisions from, and I'm clearing out the discussion we've had so far about intuition and logic, right? I'm starting from a place of, if we're making a decision from past experiences or traumas, right? Because I think we're all human. We all make decisions based on our past experiences, right? We are all building confidence from recurring experiences. And I think when we're taking action from a place of fear or from a place of like sabotage, right? These are all things that we experience on a day-to-day. Then it's so interesting because people ask me, they're like, okay, well, what's the difference between intuition and emotion? And I'm like, they're actually two different things. Intuition is a feeling that kind of surges in from your body, usually in your chest area or in your stomach area. And you kind of get like a mini hit, right? A little mini light bulb moment. It's a thought. It's an idea, right? And then what we do is we actually have an emotion towards that idea. So if we go back to an example that most people can relate to, like staying in a relationship for too long, when you know that something's wrong for you and you don't want to believe it, and then you go into like a period of denial, it's because you know what is right for you and you don't want to believe it. And there's an emotion that's separate from that experience. And so same thing when we're operating from a place of fear or sabotage or doubt or limiting beliefs, what we're doing is we know that something is right for us, right? Could even be in business, like, oh, I wanted to start a podcast or I wanted to do this thing, and I know deep down, I know that I'm meant for that. I'm meant for something more. But something else is making that decision for me. And it's fear. And it's coming from a place where it's not coming from love, right? It's not coming from like your higher self, I like to say.
Yeah, it's so good. I always like to think of it this way. It's like fear begets more fear, right? It's like if you're making a decision from a lower emotion, that's usually going to manifest into things that are similar to that energetically. It's universal law, right? Versus if you're making a decision from love or you're feeling really confident and it's a very grounded decision, like attracts like. And so that's a really big thing. I'm really curious too, when it comes to like intuitive decision-making and like, let's talk about business plans for a second. Cause you were talking about Elon Musk and I wanted to just like interject and say, you mean he didn't have a 20-year business plan to know exactly how things were going to go and at all his projections? No, of course not. Right. So it's like knowing how to make adjustments. I'm curious because you're a very strategic, logical person, right? When you do planning now, how do you do planning? What's your take on, especially in business and money? Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, that's a loaded question. So, a couple of things. So you obviously know my background because we've been friends for a few years, but I came from a background of operations. So I managed products like AirPods for Apple, and I've managed over 300 employees and over $1 billion worth of product, right? And so managing warehouses and people and process and writing SOPs and basically doing like the most painful shit in like the business and the corporate world, I naturally have like I've exercised it as a muscle before. And so for me, for many years, I think I found safety and stability in planning. And I was the kind of person where it was better for me to know the answer and make the wrong decision just so that I knew the answer, rather than me being a little bit more open-minded and making choices as things come, right? I'm the classic cookie cutter type A personality, right? When you think of like that was me for so many years. And so I'm actually going to share a recent story because it's new, I'm human and I still make these mistakes, but it's interesting. I always thought that Intuitive CEO would be a mid to high ticket program. It's a coaching program. It's a consulting program. I help entrepreneurs, high achievers step into entrepreneurship, entrepreneurs already wanting to scale and grow their businesses, but from a more intuitive way, right? And I also have half of my program has heavy scaling, SOPs, business strategy, tactics, and the other half is more of like a spiritual transformation. And so it's so interesting because in the beginning of this whole journey, I wanted a plan. And I was like so gung-ho about having this plan. And intuitively, I had a feeling, and I just want to take a pause here. When I say I had a feeling, it wasn't loud. It was not obvious. It wasn't, didn't come to me in a dream or anything. It wasn't like very obvious. But as I was taking action towards building this thing, things didn't feel right. Okay, they didn't feel right. So I would go and like rush things and try to make it into something that it wasn't. Like I launched a lower ticket program when I first kicked this off, and it wasn't even branded as the Intuitive CEO. And I listened to a lot of people's advice, right? You should do this, you should do that. I listened to the podcast and all the things and all this, consulting, all the stuff online that you can get, like free information. And I was convinced that, the way that it was set up at the time, I needed to go that route. And so I launched it and I had crickets, right? And I had crickets because I rushed this plan. I tried to fill it up with as much information as possible. And when things didn't go as I expected, as I wanted, I had an enrollment rate, but it wasn't great, right? It didn't feel aligned with who I was becoming. I was really bummed. But you know what I said to myself? I said, when it didn't work out, I was like, I kind of knew that didn't feel right? I'm like, that was exactly what I went back to. And I'm going to go a little bit on a rant here because I think it's really important. In a lot of my terminology, I talk about the concept of what being your higher self is. And I'm going to use it in this example because I think it applies. So I think when someone asked me the other day, what is being your higher self? What is that? It's a very abstract topic. What does it mean? You can define it in so many different ways. And for me, I believe that we can go about our lives from two different lenses, okay? Spiritual genius is all about energy, so I'll kind of take it in that direction. But we can either live our lives from a point of view of fear and pride and all these emotions that are very reactive, right? Those are like lower energy emotions. Or we can operate and we can see the world from a place of acceptance, from a place of truth, from a place of inspiration, creativity. And every day when we wake up, we basically have a pair of glasses on, okay? And we navigate the world. We say hi to our kids. We say hi to our dogs. We open up our first email and we have this peripheral of the world with whatever energy we are carrying. And so what I like to do with my clients is I love to understand whomever they want to become, whatever business they want to create, whatever 5-year goals that they have, what the most optimal version of them looks like, right? The one that is a great business partner, has the most revenue that they want in their business, the type of business structure, right? We're really creating like their most ideal self, right? And then we do this exercise where we're like, okay, how does that person react to all of these things, right? Like, how are they acting on a daily basis? And most of the time in their most ideal self, when we're doing vision work and we're really tapping into that, most people in their most optimal self are operating from inspiration, creativity, love, abundance, right? You're not wearing scarcity. And that is the concept of your higher self. So when you're making business plans and when you're making decisions on a daily basis, and you're not asking yourself, what level of energy am I making this decision from? Am I planning because I'm afraid, right? We're pulling ourselves down. Am I planning because I have to have the answers? Or am I planning from a place of like, oh my God, this idea just came to me. I feel so abundant. I got to write this down. And I think as we're growing and becoming who we want to become, it's so key to build a self-awareness around the type of decisions that you're making as an entrepreneur, as anyone, as a high achiever, and where you are making those decisions. Because to be reactive is very different than to intentionally respond.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. I love the metaphor of putting on the two different glasses or two different hats, right? And it's like when you say higher self, it's the self that comes from higher energy, right? Because we all have different pockets of energy, right? And it's like being able to understand where's that decision coming from. And it's interesting because, when I think about like some people say being higher self, I think in the spiritual world, anyway, people who are, down the spiritual rabbit hole, it's almost like there's this thing around, okay, be higher self, to sit there and meditate, right? Or, sit there and do these things or go to this retreat or do plant medicine or, whatever else people do. And I think you and I are both in agreement is our daily life can be that spiritual practice where we get to practice being our higher self, especially in our businesses.
Yeah. I mean, you're really, you're poking me because I was just talking about this with someone the other day. Someone was like, okay, so what's your opinion on like aggressive morning routines? And I'm like, I'm so happy you asked me this question because I'm going to give the audience the most annoying answer ever. And I just love being that person giving the annoying answer. And annoying because it's unconventional and it's not straightforward. Okay. But I believe that the definition of any spiritual practice, yoga, meditation, breath work, like whatever, right? Astrology, tarot cards, like we can go on the spectrum here, right? Doesn't matter what it is, silent retreats. It is just you coming back to your truth, right? It's coming back to your soul. It is coming back to your intuition. It is coming back to your authentic self. And the thing is, in life, we have so many things that are preventing us from stepping into that. You have politics, you have social media, you have these identities of, what it means to be successful, how you should spend your money, how it is to we have all these personas that we see mirrors around us. And we try on these different identities as we go through our life experiences, right? Whether it be relationships, businesses, and we start to lose touch with ourselves. And so the whole point of a morning routine, the whole point of all of these modalities is so that you can come back into yourself and make the right decisions for you, okay? I don't like yoga, and I'm never going to like it, and no one's going to force me to do yoga, but I love taking outdoor walks, right? I love spending an hour just listening to nature and grounding myself. And so when someone asks me, well, how do you create a system for yourself in your life? Or how would you give me advice to be my higher self or to get grounded or whatever that looks like? And I'm like, take out a piece of paper, write down 5 things that have truly made you feel extremely present. And it can be like, whatever that is for you. It could be doing Legos. If Legos makes you happy, that could be your grounding way of bringing yourself back to you. And so I'm anti-morning routine because for me personally, as an intuitive CEO, I'm horrible at waking up. Like, don't talk to me before 9 a.m. I don't want to talk to you, right? That's where I'm most creative. That's where I'm most, where I can really pull, really give myself into what I'm working on. So kind of a tangent, but I am very adamant about that. I'm not into the morning routines.
Okay, let's unpack that because you said a couple of great things there, right? So I love that you're not married to a modality. You're like, okay, to be spiritual, you have to do yoga, you have to do plant medicine, you have to be, I think if people come from that place, it's actually very egoic, right? There's only one way. It can help to have that conviction, right? But I think it's at its core, there's nuance, right? We're all a little bit different. There's gonna be things that I resonate with that you don't, maybe vice versa. So I look at it, it's kind of like there's a whole toolbox. There's a whole range of different things that can help you connect with higher self, connect with source energy. Then it's up to you to get the data and experiment and explore and go deeper. So that's one thing. So with morning routines, also very relatable. I don't want to talk to anyone before 10 a.m., right? So I probably wake up an hour later, so it's calibrated. But for me, I look at it as like there's a range of things that are going to happen every morning, for me anyway. And I know I'm going to meditate for 5 minutes. That's going to happen. I know I'm going to take a shower. That's a given. Not going to miss my showers, right? I know I'm going to drink tea just about every morning, right? And everything else, I know I'm going to journal every morning as well. Everything else, though, when it happens, the actual order and I guess brush my teeth, but we don't have to include that. That actual order, though, is arbitrary. So if I wake up and first thing I'm like effing inspired and I'm like, let's go, and I want to create something, I'm going to create something. I'm not going to say, oh, I need to do my routine first, right? So it's really interesting because I think there's like different levels to this. I think there's the level of complete reactivity, right? Where someone's just going about their like completely reactive. Their morning routine is they look at the phone, check emails, get pissed off, right? We've all been there before. And there's someone who has like the extreme structure, like it's militant. Okay, I have to do these 15 things in this order under 15 minutes, like that kind of thing. And then there's like the intuitive way that you're talking about is like you just allow things to happen and you trust that you're going to take care of yourself and take care of the most important things.
Yes. And I do think so, just to be clear, it's not like I'm sitting here, saying, I sing Kumbaya every morning and, I hope that things get done. No. I'm still a very structured person, but I'll give an example to give an actual tangible tip if you're trying to be more intuitive with your day to day. So I look at the natural way in which I love to create and the natural way that I love to work out. Like those are like two different things, right? That are pretty on one end of the spectrum versus the other. I'm not going to work out at 1 a.m. It's just not my body, right? But interestingly enough, we all have like night owl friends who are very creative at like 3 a.m. So I think you can have a routine, but it's to know and to trust that those times are the most optimal for you. So for example, like my most creative time is from 8 to 11 in the morning. I don't really schedule meetings there. And I love working out around 4 or 5 p.m. So because I kind of know that that's the way that I best respond to those things, meaning that when I'm in the gym, I am most inclined to put all of my effort, all of my focus to get the most out of that. And same for the creative stuff. I create, the masculine, I structure my routine to know that those are the most optimal times. So I want to be clear with that because it's not like we're saying hope for the best. I do think it's good to have some structure, but it's to know the natural way of how you are and trying to set your schedule with like your rhythm.
Yeah, it comes with intentionality, right? That structure, that intentionality, but also allowing for flow, allowing for variance. And I also think, I love this idea of us having an operating system, right? Just like an iPhone has the iOS, right? We all have our personal operating system. I think it's very spiritual to first of all have that awareness of what your personal operating system is, and also to give yourself grace that it can evolve, right? You may be at your most creative from 8 to 11 now, 5 years from now, maybe at night, who knows, right? But just like if that starts to happen, being open to it and being receptive, I think it's really big rather than being rigid and say, hey, it's going to be this way my whole life. No, I think there's growth in being able to switch things up, but just testing in a small way.
Yeah. And I think, I've had some pushback where people are like, I could never trust myself. And I don't know why. I could just never do it. So I need to like set my alarm clock. And I think a lot of people don't, that's why we have infrastructure for the world to run on. So, so someone asked me the other day, they were like, okay, I was doing an exercise with a client. She was like, I have these like 5 blocks in my business and I don't know. I know they're coming from a wounded place. She has like some self-awareness, she's like, I know they're coming from a place that like, I don't want to choose. Like, how do we figure out like what is blocking me from this? And I was like, okay. So we did an exercise. I have this like fun Venn diagram of like healthy masculine energy, healthy feminine energy, and what that looks like. So to give some examples and to use her example. So she's very overgiving and she doesn't have firm pricing. So she never ends up like making the money she wants to make because she just kind of like in the heat of the moment, she just kind of gives whatever just to close the sale. And to take the problem even higher up, like one level, the biggest word that she used was she has a lot of inconsistency. So we looked at like the Venn diagram, and it shows like where you're imbalanced, where you're balanced. And then she looks at like the feminine Venn diagram of the list of all the symptoms, and she's like, oh my God, I'm overgiving. Like I give and give and give, and I have no boundaries, right? And so I then have like another little matrix sheet where it shows the healthy opposite of that. And it was like having healthy boundaries and knowing your worth, right? And having the safety within you to like define your pricing and be firm in that stance, right? And be okay with like some fear of rejection, right? Having rejections. By the way, she's had this business for a while too. It's not like she's new. She just kind of hit like a lull, right? And every time she like asked for higher pricing, she got stuck there. So we discovered that the reason why she can't trust her business, right? There was a lack of consistency in her business. Essentially what that means is you don't trust your business to be stable and produce things like regularly, right? Was because she didn't trust herself, knowing her self-worth and trusting the boundaries that she had within herself. So it was kind of showing in her pricing. It was showing in her sales. And that was a big win for her. So some of the work that I ended up doing with her is like, okay, how do we trust yourself, right? How do we set the right boundaries that feel good to you, that aren't, insulting to these new clients or don't kick people off the table forever? And it kind of comes down to that. It kind of comes down to, yes, it's, trusting yourself is an interesting topic, but there's always, I'm going back to what we were just talking about. There's always something underneath that, which is why you lack that trust. So I wanted to give that example.
Okay. When you say there's something underneath that, when you work with people, do you go a layer deeper? And because it's usually the T word comes up, trauma, right? It's some sort of trauma, something happens, something energetically is off. How do you help people navigate that?
Yeah. So I do think that it is the T word. I like to call it like the big T. So some people have had really big traumas and they need guidance and support to go through them. I myself personally have been down that road. And I understand those things. They're very hard and complicated. And then there's also little trauma, like, little Billy punched you in the face at school and now you don't like guys named Billy, right? There's like little traumas like that follow us. And I'm not minimizing that, by the way. I think they all show up in our lives and have very big impacts, whether we like it or not, right? They're usually subconscious. And so I believe that, my programs, I usually take people through, I like to call them spiritual transformations because they are. I usually help people connect to their higher selves and then they end up seeing that in their business. And they're much happier and lighter people because they're operating from, the glasses that we talked about earlier. And so I think the unsexy answer to this for all my logical folks out there is that trauma is stored in your body. And so, I heard there's a famous podcast called The Diary of the CEO. And I don't typically watch his stuff, but I watched one episode recently. And he had an interviewer with a trauma-informed specialist. And the guy, and it went super viral. So maybe those listening saw the clip. But he talks about how trauma is so interesting because he used this example, if there is a cup of urine, if you dump sugar in there, there's still urine. Like you're still going to taste the urine, right? And he was talking about how like becoming better and achieving more and becoming more successful doesn't take away what you've been through, right? It doesn't take away what's there. And I can speak at this for firsthand because 95% of the success that I accomplished in my life came from big trauma, right? I found safety and stability in work, but it was like a hamster wheel that I always chased because I was never happy and it was never enough. And so the unsexy answer to this is when I carry people through whatever it is, big or small, there's typically some emotional releasing, right? People cry, people laugh. But there's always a safe container where people feel safe to express, be vulnerable, and share these things. And, it comes from a place of your body, right? Fear lives in the body. Crying and releasing all those things come from the body. So that's my unsexy answer.
Well, it's a great answer. I mean, it is the real life 3D practical answer, right? To uncover that. And it's an ongoing process. I actually think it's something to be celebrated, right? I think a big part of the spiritual journey is releasing stuff, right? And being able to, once you let something go, you can ascend, right? And become more of that higher self. And that's where, we become our future self, right? If you're looking for more clarity right now, whether that's in your business, career, relationships, or any other area of your life, I've recorded a short training you can use to find more clarity, spiritual genius style. This training is my gift to you for being a listener of the show. To access it, all you have to do is go to spiritualgenius.org/gift. Once again, that's spiritualgenius.org/gift. Now back to the show. One thing that gives me a lot of trust, I'm curious to hear your take on it, because I know this is a big part of your life as well, is trust in source and trust in the universe. And people would call it trust in God, right? It's all the same word, really. And the way that I look at it is there's a set of principles. There's energetics, there's universal laws, and those things are going to be 100% true 100% of the time. Whether you believe in them or not, they're true, right? And I feel like sometimes if people lose self-trust, they lose sight of those principles. They get out of touch with that relationship with source energy. And I feel like if you're listening to this and you're in a place where you don't trust yourself as much as you used to, those principles and that relationship that you can have with source energy, you can always fall back on them.
Yeah, I think if you are someone who is very logical driven and you're curious about kind of tapping into relying more on the faith, trust, your spiritual journey in general. I remember, you take me back 4 years, I had just gone through severe PTSD myself. And it was so interesting because when we're going through things that we don't like to experience as humans, we want to remove it. We're like, just make it stop. I want to end this experience. I don't want to feel this way anymore. And it's because we're really uncomfortable. And at the time, I felt so uncomfortable in my body. I felt so uncomfortable in my own journey because I knew that there wasn't any way out of this other than for me to go through it. And it's so interesting because it was in that point where I had no choice but to kind of trust. So I kind of hit my own rock bottom. But I remember that because I was so disconnected from everything, I really was going through a lot. I remember I would do these little things, right? I would do these little things, and I slowly started to build trust. And the thing is, if you're not relying on that today, I'm not expecting you to be able to leave a business and go to, trust yourself and make these huge decisions, right? But I think small intuitive practices really, really help. For me personally, it was asking the universe to show me yes or no in something, whether that be through manifestation or an answer that I needed. And literally within 24 hours, I would get the most obvious sign ever, right? And I was like, okay, interesting. I felt like that was right for me. And it felt good in my body, right? It felt good as a good choice for me. I made that decision because it was confirmed, right, in my outside world. And I took that decision. So I think it's all about doing the little things. And then, you can make very intuitive, aggressive decisions later on.
Yeah, I dig that. I mean, I think it's starting to follow the breadcrumbs. Like anything else, it's practice. I think a lot of people wouldn't put intuition in practice the same sense. Oh, you're either intuitive or you're not. You either have abilities or you're not. I think that's complete BS, right? I think it's a skill you can cultivate. I think we all have that intuition. We can all be intuitive CEOs. It's just a matter of bringing that out of us and exercising that potential. Just like, going to the gym, right? It's working a muscle in a sense.
Yeah. And I felt called to say this because you mentioned something before, and I was kind of getting to it when I was mentioning my journey with processing PTSD. But, our experiences are a part of who we are. And I think how we shape them and how we our processing of understanding them just transmutes that energy into us becoming different people and having different memories of that experience. So for me at the time when I was processing that, it was horrible, right? And then now I incorporate it as a part of my teachings and it's a part of who I am. So, if you're going through a super transformative period right now and you're like, get me out of this, one, it's a great time to practice intuitive, being in your intuition and faith and trust. But it's also an amazing time to just accept where you're at because it'll be a part of your story later on, right? Wherever you're going.
Yeah. And I think that's something that can really be helpful for people too, like taking that long game, like looking at a longer timeline. Okay, well, 10 years from now, 5 years from now, right? I think it makes someone less reactive versus, okay, there's today and it has to work this way today, right? So that's a really, really big thing now. So I want to ask you a little more about Intuitive CEO and kind of the vision that you have for it, right? Your personal vision for the program, for helping people. I know helping women is a big part of your mission here on this planet. So love to hear a little bit more about that. And I think our listeners, if you're listening, you'll get value from hearing about it in terms of what's available and what Sabrina's creating, but also you have someone who's very intuitive articulating her vision and sharing it openly with the world. I think that's a very, very powerful thing.
Yeah. So I feel like my vision for it is bigger than I can chew today or even talk about fully today. I feel, and I am on a mission where I truly, truly believe that you do not need to, quote, work that hard to be able to actually create the life that you want and live on your own terms. And, there's a lot of cliche out there, create your dream life, live on your own terms. But they're kind of cliche for a reason because those are things that we actually want, right? What are we doing every day? We're trying to go do that. And so I spent a decade in hustle culture. I think one of the biggest lies that we've been told as women is, we need to go and be everything all at the same time. And that was me. I was hyper CEO, hyper type A. I was chasing and I was doing all this and doing that. And I realized that if I took my foot off the gas, one, I had a fear that if I took my foot off the gas, everything would fall apart. But I realized many years later on that when I actually took the foot off the gas pedal, everything happened the way that it was supposed to be. And the only person that was left exhausted was me. Like everything was going to go the way that it was supposed to go. And so I'm on a mission to change the way that people lead businesses, lead companies, and also start businesses, co-found businesses, and also change the way that people energetically start businesses. Because I think the statistic is like 7 out of 10 entrepreneurs start businesses from some form of trauma, actually. Something in them sparked their belief, and that's why they took their own path, right? We have our own mindset, we have our own beliefs. And I think we're an incredible species, right? We're creative, we're inspirational, we lead, we're visionary, we think outside of the box. And I would love to help guide the world, create more founders that are more focused on creating amazing things and less focused on the chasing and building from a place that is truly misaligned with like their highest potential. And so for me, there's multiple pillars as a part of that. So, I'm a true believer, whether, you hate the lingo or not, masculine and feminine energies. I do believe that a lot of us are operating through an imbalance, and most of our decision-making is coming from that imbalance. So I teach a lot of that in my practices. I truly believe in the concept of becoming your higher self. I think if we all carried around the glasses of becoming your higher self, you would just make infinitely better decisions, and you would also be far more purposeful in some of the bigger things that you are going after, right? Whether that's getting married, whether that's creating another income stream in your business or starting something really big. And I will say my last pillar to this is being very comfortable in who you are becoming, and doing that through spiritual practices like body work, breath work, like whatever that might be for you. For me in my program, it's breath work. And And in combination with that, with like true business strategy, like the principles that don't die, right? Like the principles that are there forever. There are business principles that just are meant for success, right? And, being in the marketing world, I think if you combine all those things, you can truly get that life, right? You can truly make 7-8-figure income without all of the paranoia and chasing. So that is what I'm on a mission to do. And that is who I've become as a person. And yeah, I'll leave it there. Lots to talk about.
Yeah, beautifully said. I mean, we could talk for 10 more hours about this. Like literally, there's a lot to unpack there. I want to be mindful of our time, but I have to ask you about entrepreneurs starting businesses from trauma. I think it's that 7 out of 10 might be a little low. I think it'd probably be like 8 or 9 out of 10 if we really think about it, right? Because I think about all the people, and I think from personal experience, all the projects that I've started that were from trauma or needing to prove something, or from a lack, or like, not feeling enough, or all these different things. And so you see a world with Intuitive CEO where we have entrepreneurs all over the country, all over the world, starting businesses instead of trauma. What's the substitute? Are we talking about divine inspiration, or do you see it a little bit differently?
I see a world in which people are making decisions from their higher self. So it's whatever they perceive themselves to be at their highest level of consciousness.
So from their higher energy. So if someone is starting in a lower place, they're making decisions, not necessarily from an enlightened place, obviously, but maybe from courage instead of fear as a starting point, and moving up in energy as they grow and evolve as a conscious being on the planet.
Yeah, I mean, we can use me as an example. So from a very little girl, I was 16 years old. I have 2 amazing immigrant parents. But at 16, my parents went through a bankruptcy in 2008 through the economic crash. And I learned from a very young age that money needed to be guarded, that stability, emotional connection, and love came from money, because my parents lost money, and then there was a lack of love and emotional connection. And so I thought that if I proved and made money for them, I would receive that love and connection. And I also believe that money could never be kept. It could never stay a long time, that someone could just pull the rug from under you. And so for 10 years, all I did was chase one achievement after the other, because I was looking for that internal safety. So interestingly enough, after like $80 million of businesses being built, right, I came to a place where I still felt that way. Isn't that crazy? Like I was still looking for this safety. I was still looking for this love and connection. And for the women listening on this call, so fascinating, because I found success, and then I would go to men and I'm like, okay, where's my love and emotional connection? I have all the money, right? It makes me worthy, right? Because I have all the things. And I attached my self-worth to that, and I created from that place. And so interesting, because if I took that same way of thinking and I applied it to Intuitive CEO, I would never be where I am today. And I would have attracted like probably very different clients, and I couldn't have truly been able to help people. And so when I say from trauma, that's a big T, right? But that carried with me for 10 years. And the crazy thing is it made me incredibly successful. It worked, right? The problem was that I felt very empty. And so, and the way in which it made me successful didn't make me happy. It didn't give me intimacy in my relationships. And I never felt safe in my own well-being. And so now when I created Intuitive CEO, very different energy, it's from a place of trust. It's from a place of abundance, 7-8-figure business without forcing, hustling, chasing. And it comes from a place of creativity.
Yeah. And when I'm hearing you say that, it also comes from a place of inner peace. Like that's the big thing, not from this chaotic, chasey place.
Which I think most entrepreneurs create from, because there's something, it could be similar to me, it could be different. There's something there where the game of entrepreneurship, which is super fun, love the game, still love the game, never going to not love the game. But the game of it was based on like a different energy. you know?
Yeah, it's like a car is driving on a different fuel. You know, it used to be driving on propane and now it's driving on solar, super gasoline or whatever, right? But it's so much more efficient and it gets the car faster, right? And it's more fun to drive. It's more fun to go out there. So Sabrina, as we wrap up, where can people go to find out more about you and connect with you online?
Yeah, easiest way is through my website, sabrinaguler.com. I have like resources on there. I also have a podcast, so you guys can check that out. And then I am pretty active on Instagram. I respond to messages. And my handle is Sabrina M for Mary Guler.
Awesome. Love it. Well, Sabrina, thank you again for being here. This has been great. Lots of great stuff for our listeners. So thank you for coming on, providing so much value.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And thank you for listening to another episode of the Spiritual Genius Show. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Spiritual Genius Show. Remember to subscribe and leave a 5-star review. When you email a screenshot of your review to info@spiritualgenius.org, we'll send you access to a special training on unlocking more of your spiritual genius in your business or career. Once again, the email address to send that screenshot of your review to is info@spiritualgenius.org. And remember, as always, the content of this episode and every other episode of this show are for entertainment purposes only. No solicitations are being made of the audience, and this show is not in any way intended to provide or be a substitute for any medical, legal, or financial advice. It is strongly recommended that you consult with a licensed professional before making any and all decisions around these matters. Till next time, stay well and remember that your spiritual genius awaits.